In 2019, the Silver Lining Foundation's second nationwide school climate study collected surveys from a total of 2,284 students across 39 secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago. This was about 3.5 times larger than the group surveyed in 2016 for our first school climate study, which surveyed 651 students from 20 schools. Like the previous study, this survey measured the types of bullying to which students are subjected and those they perpetrated. Students from all economic backgrounds, ethnicities, and geographies were surveyed. Male and female students were fairly equally represented in this sample, with the former accounting for 45.9% and the latter group accounting for 47.9%. The missing designation, 6.2%, may be due to students' oversight or unwillingness to identify with either of these categories. Future projects will include categories to account for intersex students and various gender identities. Every age group was present in the sample. In statistical analyses of all areas examined, age group accounted for less than 1% of the variance, representing a small-sized effect, meaning that age had no bearing overall on whether someone would engage in bullying or experience bullying. Other factors were more impactful on students' expectations and experiences of school violence. When it came to bullying perpetration, ethnicity accounts for approximately 6% of the variance, representing a medium-sized effect, while age accounted for approximately 1% of the variance, representing a small-sized effect. Similarly, with bullying victimization, ethnicity accounted for approximately 4% of the variance, representing a medium-sized effect, while age accounted for approximately 1% of the variance, representing a small-sized effect. This means that ethnicity had a larger role than age in influencing bullying perpetration and victimization. 85.2% of the student population identified as heterosexual, citing that they liked people of the opposite sex. The remaining three categories, I like people of the same sex, of both sexes, and I like who I like, sex doesn't matter, made a combined 12.8% and will be considered non-heterosexual, and in this study will be referred to as queer, meaning persons who experience love and desire beyond normative heterosexual desire. According to the Trevor Project's National Survey on LGBTQ Youth Mental Health 2019, in the USA, LGBTQ youth in the survey identified with more than 100 sexual orientations and 100 gender identities. The acronym LGBTQ encompasses this diversity, meaning lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. While the previous study was open-ended in some respects to access students' opinions and fill gaps we may have overlooked, this study was less open-ended, using a combination of tested scales and measures created and utilized by other researchers in this area, as well as some scales we ourselves designed based on themes that emerged from the previous survey and from existing literature. These scales allow for comparison of data from different sites that have used the same scales. School climate refers to the social environment within the school and encompasses its disciplinary structure, teacher and peer support, academic expectations, and feelings of personal safety and empowerment. Several scales were adapted to capture this information. Additionally, the survey assessed for the impact of the following factors as predictors of bullying perpetration and victimization: individual aggression, self-esteem, empowerment, exposure to LGBTQ persons, attitudes towards LGBTQ persons, exposure to sex education, support from family, friends, and a significant other, homophobic agency or taunting, being a target for homophobia, meaning receiving homophobic taunts and teasing, and school climate factors like teasing and bullying, willingness to help others, aggressive attitudes, exposure to school rules, and personal safety. These predictors were found to better explain the variance in bullying perpetration than in victimization, meaning that they better predicted who participated in bullying than those who were its targets. Here are some of our major findings. Physical bullying. Although 20% of all students sometimes resorted to pushing and hitting, boys were more likely to use physical aggression, push or hit a classmate, and also experienced physical assaults, pushing and hitting more than girls. Similarly with verbal bullying, male students were shown to be teased and called names slightly more than female students, while also engaging in more teasing and name-calling, including targeting others based on appearance, race, sexual orientation, and religion. Female students were slightly more likely to be the subject of rumors, while boys were slightly more inclined to be the originators of rumors. Although 19.2% of students surveyed admitted to often using foul language, compared to girls, boys engaged in more intimidation, threatening behaviors, and use of curse words. They were also more likely to be the targets of such language. Face-to-face and word-of-mouth teasing were more prevalent than teasing through the use of cell phones and social media, called cyberbullying. This data does not reflect changes that occurred since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, which led to increased use of digital technologies for educational use. Students had increased screen time, thus their experiences of cyberbullying have likely changed. The data we collected showed that boys were more likely to use cell phones and social media for teasing, name-calling, and spreading rumors, while girls were more likely to be the targets of such actions. Boys engaged in ostracism of peers slightly more than girls did, although girls reported more incidents of being the person who was ostracized from the social group. Sexual bullying. Among all students, 9.5% experienced sexual violence, while 5.3% were perpetrators of sexual violence. The majority of students did not perpetrate or experience sexual violence. Greater percentages of boys reported being touched in private body areas without consent and of receiving sexually explicit gestures than girls, although boys also did most of the touching. Sexually explicit comments were made at a slightly higher rate online and on phones than in face-to-face contact. About 5.1% of students admitted forcing someone to perform sexual acts on themselves or others. Boys were more likely to force someone to perform sex acts on them or others compared to girls, while girls were more likely to be forced to perform sexual acts. 4.8% of boys and 8.7% of girls reported verbal abuse and insults if they turned down a sexual advance. Sex and sexuality education. 64.4% of students noted the value of sex education for helping them feel prepared for sexual situations, including reducing issues around consent. Without proper sex education, students rely on other means like peers, media, or pornography to answer their questions, which can lead to misinformation and unrealistic sexual ideals. Comprehensive sex and sexuality education in all schools with age-appropriate materials are essential for breaking cycles of child sexual abuse, incest, and sexual bullying. Transformation of the gendered norms and expectations, including the ways in which we engage in social and sexual relationships, is another integral factor for breaking cycles of violence and abuse. Imagine how different our relationships can be if we are taught how to foster open, honest, and gentle communication, patience, forgiveness, trust, and partnership. LGBTQ exposure and attitudes. Homophobia was shown to significantly impact the perpetration of bullying. When homophobia increases, so does bullying. While greater exposure to LGBTQ persons also showed increased perpetration of bullying, students' exposure to positive attitudes towards LGBTQ persons had the opposite effect, reducing bullying. Exposure to LGBTQ persons varied significantly based on racial background, with students of African background having greater exposure to LGBTQ persons than students of other racial backgrounds. However, students of East Indian background were found to be most accepting of sexual differences compared to other groups. Just over 61% of students said they had met LGBTQ persons before, with similar amounts noting the presence of LGBTQ students at their school. Recognizing the presence of such students ensures that curricula, policies, and practices are sensitive to their needs, including the need for respect. Over 36% of students felt that LGBTQ people they knew were treated with respect, while 31.9% disagreed, believing that the LGBTQ people they knew or saw were not treated with respect. Over 56% of students agreed that the LGBTQ people they knew or saw deserved to be treated with respect. And 59.3% of students felt that all LGBTQ people deserved to be treated with respect. Studies have found that a positive school environment, defined as greater disciplinary structure, teacher support, teacher diversity, and higher academic expectations, had positive impacts on decreasing bullying perpetration and victimization across all racial groups, and in creating a safer school environment for transgender students, with lower anxiety and depressive symptoms among lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students. SLF's 2016 survey found that LGBTQ students experienced bullying at higher rates than non-LGBTQ students, but also showed higher propensity in all categories for engaging in bullying. The data from 2019 presented in this report corroborate these earlier findings. It showed that students who were exclusively same-sex loving had the highest mean scores for bullying perpetration and bullying victimization. Students in the 15 to 16 age group were most likely targeted for homophobic content, while the 13 to 14 age group was shown to express homophobia. School climate. A central question of this survey pertains to how the school environment fosters a safe and respectful learning space while minimizing violence and conflict. The survey distinguishes between aggression as an individual trait demonstrated by students and aggressive attitudes as a feature of the school environment. Two dimensions of school climate, teasing and bullying, and aggressive attitudes, were significant predictors of victimization. Similarly, two dimensions of school climate, willingness to help, and aggressive attitudes, were significant predictors of perpetration. Where students were empowered to help one another, bullying was lessened. More than half of the students surveyed, 57.3%, felt their school was a supportive and inviting place to learn. A little over a quarter of the students were neutral about this, but 17.3%, making up 396 of the 2,284 students surveyed, felt their schools was not supportive or inviting and felt unsafe and unhappy in school. Their learning experience was being negatively impacted by the conditions within the school's social environment. When there is a clear understanding of the school rules and the consequences of breaking these rules, students reported being targeted less, which in turn contributed to students feeling safer at school. Where students felt safer at school, there was less perpetration of bullying. Indeed, Studies have found that consistent enforcement of discipline in school through structure, meaning the enforcement of rules, and support, meaning the availability of caring adults, were associated with school safety, reducing both bullying behaviors and victimization. Both aspects complemented each other. Thus, the enforcement of school rules must be coupled with support from adults in order to positively impact school safety for adolescents. Where teachers and peers responded well to students' reports of bullying, students felt safer. 71.3% of students felt that teachers were helpful when bullying occurred. Consequently, 71.7% of students said they would tell a teacher or staff member if they were being bullied. The bystander effect influences students' response to bullying. While 48.6% of students felt peers responded well to incidents of bullying by reporting it to a teacher, 51.4% noted that other students did not inform teachers when bullying was occurring. More must be done for students to feel safe to communicate with teachers, parents, and administrators when bullying occurs. Only 31.3% of students felt there was mutual respect amongst peers, while 19.3% felt there was not, and 37.4% chose to be neutral, indicative that respect needs to be more explicitly experienced, including from adults, who should model the show of respect and dignity to each other and to students. Only 38.5% of students felt that adults at school showed respect for students. 30.9% of students disagreed, finding that adults did not show respect for students, while 28.7% chose a neutral response. In a diverse setting, if schools do not foster a culture of respect for differences, conflict and bullying may increase. Promoting respect for diversity and for differences between students is associated with decreased reports of bullying. Self-esteem, empowerment, and aggression. Self-esteem and empowerment are not the same. Self-esteem refers to self-valuation, but empowerment is structural, referring to the belief that one has the power to impact one's own life and that of the people around them, and brought about by the formal and informal removal of conditions that foster powerlessness. The now debunked myth that bullies have low self-esteem is also shown in this research. Students who bully have higher self-esteem. Alternatively, empowered students were less likely to bully and demonstrated less aggression. Aggressive behaviors in students correlated to increased bullying perpetration. Aggression was the strongest predictor for both perpetration and victimization models. There is an inverse relationship between aggression and empowerment, meaning that students who demonstrated more aggression also felt less empowered. Feelings of empowerment significantly and inversely influenced bullying perpetration and victimization. Thus, students who felt empowered to impact their own lives and environment were less likely to participate in acts of bullying. Empowerment strategies in schools and classrooms are necessary for fostering feelings of empowerment among students. The majority, 76.8% of students, noted that teachers allowed their participation in class discussions and activities, and 60.7% noted that teachers would go out of their way to assist students and provide additional attention. As noted earlier, however, respect and trust are also essential elements to fostering empowerment, not just at school, but also at home and in the workplace. Racial background had a greater impact on perpetration of bullying and on bullying victimization than on self-esteem and on empowerment. Students of African descent demonstrated more inclination to bully and were also the racial group that experienced the most bullying and had the lowest mean score for empowerment. Some strategies for fostering empowerment include allowing students a forum to speak and share opinions, fostering student leadership, working together on teacher-student teams, using technology meaningfully for student-generated content such as videos, webcasts, or blogs, and engaging students outside the classroom in community outreach, volunteerism, debates, and other competitive activities. The Sexual Culture of Justice project has provided teacher training programs for conflict resolution and diversity management called Safer Schools, Diversity and Inclusion in the Classroom. The programs detail these and other strategies for encouraging student engagement and empowerment, as well as fostering a respectful classroom. Social support. Although support of friends and family has been found to reduce participation in acts of bullying, it played a more significant role in preventing victimization. Having support from a significant other, family, and from friends reduces bullying victimization, perhaps as students had better support systems and could find help for these issues. The more social support a person has, the less likely they are to be bullied. This finding was corroborated by a 2012 study by Abdurrahman and others, who studied the data collected from 6,780 respondents to the Global School-Based Student Health Survey (GSHS), conducted in the Cayman Islands, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago in 2007, which showed that students who felt that their parents were understanding and monitored their free time activities reported fewer mental health issues and were somewhat less likely to report being a victim of a bully. Reforming school, home, and community. We advocate an intersectional approach that includes school-wide change, family, and community involvement. Change should be executed in 4 overlapping and interrelated areas: reforming school climate, social and emotional learning, and social justice learning, creating stronger support systems, and fostering personal development. Partnerships between family, school, and community are proven to improve student outcomes, such as university readiness and leadership, by increasing exposure to a wider array of interests, promoting improved attendance, and improving access to social capital, the social relationships that can help one succeed. Collaborating with district, regional, and national institutions and organizations allows for wider and stronger support networks that can better cater to students' needs. Coalitions and collaborations would allow for the pooling of resources and ideas that can reach students at various social, emotional, and economic situations. Beginning with a shared school vision to guide the development of procedures and practices, we can create a school climate that fosters mutual respect, willingness to help, a clear understanding of school rules, and the consequences for acts of violence, which will effect a decline in bullying. Administrators and teachers are encouraged to participate in programs that give them the tools to evaluate classroom and school climate, such as that offered by the Sexual Culture of Justice, and other opportunities for professional development, including restorative justice practices, and training that allows them to provide support for students experiencing trauma, grief, and other hardship. Considering students' psychological needs alongside their academic needs lends itself to social and emotional learning and social justice learning. Social, emotional, and ethical learning curriculum should be developed for each age group, whereby students learn to manage their emotions and social relationships. This whole child approach to instruction includes a social emotional perspective in curricula, assessment policies, and in disciplinary practices that would seek to preserve relationships, respect dignity, and provide psychological support. Rather than basing discipline on punishment, we advocate for accountability and social responsibility, utilizing restorative justice practices that empower students and positively impact behaviors.